The percentage of people that I work with at this point that open up their marriage or engage in kink or BDSM to kind of save a relationship is pretty high.
Today, we're exploring an incredibly unique and often misunderstood space, alternative lifestyles. We are joined by an expert therapist, Eliot Andre. Eliot runs Connected Roots, a practice dedicated to supporting individuals in non-monogamous, LGBTQ+, kink, and polyamorous lifestyles.
If we lived in a society where non-monogamy or polyamory was the norm, people would do that. Humans are inherently in need of connection, and more than one connection. The rules are meant to be broken, man.
In this episode, we dive into the growing trend of ethical non-monogamy and the surge of interest in polyamory.
You can meet so many people in those spaces. They're just as kinky as I am or into BDSM in the way that I strive to be. Oh my God, there's people like me. I see them. This is so incredible. I know that one person in my life cannot fulfill everything and all the needs that I have.
Eliot shares insights on how to navigate relationship complexities, build meaningful connections, and the importance of open communication in any alternative lifestyle.
My experience, other than it's fucking great, is that...
Have you ever wondered what masculinity even is in the modern era? Are you ready to move beyond the macho bully or the soy boy archetypes? I'm Marc Azoulay, and this is the Men's Therapy Podcast. Together, we'll explore how neuroscience, Jungian psychology, and Buddhist philosophy can transform your life, your marriage, and your business. Are you ready to deep dive into the minds of men? Let's begin. Hello, welcome back to the Men's Therapy Podcast. I'm your host, Marc Azoulay, and I'm here with a longtime friend, Eliot Andre. He runs a practice called Connected Roots that is kind of like a local expert on working with individuals that are non-monogamous, that have alternative lifestyles. We're talking BDSM, kink, polyamory, all of it. He also works with LGBTQ and queer individuals. So, Eliot, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Mark. It's such a pleasure, as always. I love being able to share freely on these spaces with you about what I do and some of the people that I help and serve.
Yeah, so I'm really excited to talk to you because, we actually went to a conference together. We went to the CCA conference, and you were talking about presenting. It was awesome. Yeah, we were talking about presenting about the polyamory bomb, right? This idea that the polyamory is exploding, I think, in modern culture right now. So I'd love to just chat with you about what you see happening, what's a healthy versus unhealthy way to go through that, and what, some kind of precautions people might take before opening up their relationship or their marriage. So let's start with the first one. Is what do you see is happening in our culture right now? Because I really do see a shift towards, more people identifying as queer and more people identifying as non-monogamous.
Absolutely. I mean, it's been an interesting shift as somebody who opened their relationship up almost 7 years now. Since then, it's been incredible to see the amount of people that are doing that, right? Opening their relationships or identifying kind of alternatively, and also, just what and how people are doing it and being open about it, and the communication and the spaces that are there for people engaging in this way. I mean, E&M and polyamory, I mean, all different kinds of ways of identifying in the community, kinky, someone who engages in BDSM. I mean, all these things have been something in our culture that have always been there. I think lately it's just been kind of, at this point, and I say this in all respects to the people in the community, kind of like the hip, cool thing to do. And people are very much so doing it in a way that can be, I'd say, kind of black or white, either really engaging in the community and the experiences really well, or not so much. And it's been pretty apparent that there isn't enough education, not enough communication about how to actually start to engage in these communities. So, I think that's what I've noticed. That's what I've seen has been something that has been really beneficial for my own experience to kind of support and help people open up, engaging kink, BDSM, E&M, and really see kind of how to do it in a way that's supportive to their relationships rather than something that, is in some regards detrimental. I mean, the percentage of people that I work with at this point that open up their marriage or engage in kink or BDSM to kind of save a relationship is pretty high. So trying to find a space in a place for people to come and engage in that in a way that's really more supportive and more of a stabilizing factor in their relationships rather than something that just blows the fuck up in some instances. So, it being kind of this cool, hip thing to do, there's a lot of pros, there's a lot of cons to that. And then how then that is kind of perpetuated over time and what it looks like for people. So, uh, yeah, it's a very, let's say, challenging lifestyle, as it's so fluid, right? In regards of what people want, what people see, what and how we're engaging, what's changing over time. So there's a broad range of, yeah, just what that looks like for individuals, couples, any kind of people who are wanting to be in the space.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, my bias, it seems like way too complicated for me personally. So I'm happy to be able to talk to you because I really do. I mean, knowing you personally, I think you and your partners, you guys do it as right as I can see. I think like I think it is really challenging, and there of course is tons of conflict and complexity. But for the listeners out there, I know Eliot personally, and like him and his polycules seem to really do it well. Where I've seen a lot of people not do it as well, and kind of what you said, it blows up in their face often.
Yeah, I mean, we're trying, man. There's still trials and errors and tribulations. I mean, we're I'm as expert as much as I can be with the work that I've done and the people around me who have supported me engaging this way. So, it's not it's not like, seeing my experience today has not come with its own, discrepancies, trials, tribulations, hardships, all the things. I mean, I just really want to let listeners know that, like, if you're going to be engaging in this lifestyle like that, there's a lot of work that needs to be done, a lot of growth that you can experience, and it's not being a walk in the park. It's I always tell people, non-monogamy, polyamory has allowed me to grow more so than I would have ever had in the last 10 years of my life, honestly, because of how much work it is and how many kind of reframes I've had to make with my upbringing and the experiences that I've had, and really trying to find a path and a way of engaging in the lifestyle that's the most supportive to me, because I've had so many different kinds of ways of engaging with non-monogamy and ethical non-monogamy and all its sorts is in regards of how I've done it, and now I found a kind of space that works best for me, in that sense.
Yeah, so let me ask you this, and I may be ignorant to some of the lingo and stuff, so please correct me. Right? But like, I'm curious, do you believe, or do we have any idea, is polyamory, are you born with it, or is it something that you can develop and grow? Because I think, and you please correct me on this, because this I'm not quite sure, but my understanding around sexuality, right, is like you're kind of born with a sexuality, right? It's not something that you kind of like develop over time, or which means that like, yeah, you can't really judge people for it because it's just how they are. Is polyamory similar, where it's like some people are born with it, some people are not?
I mean, based on my own experience, because that's the only place I can really speak to, I feel like I was born as a polyamorous human, and I think in twofold. One, because I found myself consistently loving and being, quote unquote, we'll say, attracted to multiple people at multiple kind of places in my life, and really polyamory, if you break it down, is poly is many, and amory is like the idea of being able to love multiple people, right? If you put the two together. So, polyamory to me, in sense, is not just about romantic relationships. It's also about fluid relationships. It's also about platonic connection as well, because you can absolutely love multiple people. And I think inherently as humans, we're built, we're bred to do so, just like so many of our our ancestors and other animals in the diverse world that we live in. They some have partners for life, others have multiple, and and really depending on kind of what's advantageous to the species or the people, is what kind of changes that, right? Ultimately in our society, we've been almost, and I say this lightly, but bred to, in some ways, be monogamous because that's what's safe. That's what religion says. That's what the rhetoric is what makes most sense for people to do. If we lived in a society where, non-monogamy or polyamory was the norm, people would do that. However, in our space, our culture, in America in general, right, having a single partner is what people think of. That's what's shown in media. That's what, is what our parents believe in for the most part, right? Depending on their situations. But, it's like have one partner, have children, have a home, have a happy life, right? It doesn't take into account kind of these other alternative ways of doing so, that really, I think are super supportive. I mean, non-monogamy, polyamory, in regards of having a family, to me makes so much more sense than it does in a monogamous mindset. You have multiple people caring for the child, multiple experiences they can have. It's more diverse. It's more, open in regards of like acceptance of certain different alternative things, and really can engage in a way that, has that option, right? And it's a choice, in a sense. I feel like in our monogamous mindsets or monogamous culture, it's like very much so, this is kind of the path that makes most sense. This is what you can do. This is what you can't do. And this is kind of what people expect. And I don't mean that in saying that that's everybody's experience, but more in a general sense of what I just know or what I've learned or what my own experience was of what that looks like. So, to continue to answer the question, I think we're very much so as humans polyamorous and have the ability to engage in that if we are given the option to at a young age.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know there's some indigenous, cultures that are polyamorous by nature, right? And it's actually the men that are polyamorous, right? Where you don't know who the father is, especially if you don't have like modern medicine and technology, but you definitely know who the mother is because that's where the baby comes out of, right? Like it's clear who the mother is. But if the culture is polyamorous, you don't know who the dad is because you don't know what particular, insemination created that baby. But there are some indigenous cultures that I've researched and learned about that, it's kind of all the men in the tribe act as a kind of father role for all the children, so that's like a different way of organizing a society.
Right. And there are other rare occasions that I've also read about where it's the opposite, where the wives can have multiple husbands as well. It's a little bit less likely, but it does happen as well.
Yeah. So I'm curious, you talked about people opening up their relationship because their marriage isn't working. And, I think me being more of a vanilla normie therapist, that's my interaction with this world for the most part, right? Is people that, are considering divorce and they're like, okay, maybe it's because I'm not sexually satisfied, or maybe it's because this person can't meet my needs and I need to open it up. So I want to dive into that. But I guess the first question I want to ask you is like, do you believe in like the 7-year itch? I don't know if you've heard this idea, right? Where like people after 7 years of a relationship, like it just starts to kind of fall apart. And I guess like anecdotally, I've seen that. I've seen those kind of cycled, with people. So yeah, I'm curious. Yeah, do you believe in that, or what do you think that's about?
Yeah, I mean, again, based on my own experience in marriage, in a monogamous marriage, absolutely, I have felt the 7-year itch, and it wasn't 7 years in marriage; it was more so 7 years in relationship with my wife partner. So I think, and again, generally speaking, based on my own experience, there are kind of factors that absolutely play into this concept of a 7-year itch, and I think there's two of them primarily that happened in my experience. One, we were under an incredible amount of stress in our relationship in terms of financially and kind of the expectations that were put on us, as well as, just I guess just where we were in our lives at the time. We got married super young. We'd been together since we were 22, 21. And all of that kind of came to the head when things in the workplace were not going well, right? So I'd say first and foremost, that was the biggest factor. Was just like there was not a sense of stability, for sure. I think the second part is that Lauren and I had a really strong sexual connection when we first started dating and were together. And then when we started to get super secure within our connection, almost, to the point of too secure, that kind of level of dopamine in our relationship connection, the excitement, the feistiness kind of faltered a little bit. And I think that's normal in a lot of connection, for sure. That, things start really strong and then things kind of tend to taper off. I've worked with so many men over the past 5 years, 6 years that have said, I'm in a sexless marriage. Like, well, yeah, sure, it makes sense. You're a secure, stable person, and there then breeds a bit of complacency in regards of what that looks like. I think as a culture, as people, we tend to get really comfortable after a certain period of time and engaging in things that are maybe a little bit more difficult or hard to kind of spice things up, shall we say, in connection, in long-term relationship, is really hard to do. It's extremely hard to do. And, it's something that I think people consistently struggle with. So, that 7 years, it could be 5, it could be 4, it could be 10, in regards to whatever anybody's personal experience is. I just think that it's very much true that there are patterns in relationship that in so many instances kind of are not worked on, are not something that people really truly think about as an issue that may show up until they're experiencing it. And I think that's something that really kind of comes at people really quickly. I mean, there's so many factors that relate to that concept for people that, again, you don't think about until they're really there in front of you in so many ways. And it's brutal, man. It's really brutal. And it comes out of nowhere. Like, I never thought that I'd be in a place to not engage with intimacy with my wife, after being together, after being secure, after, experiencing so many things together, and it was very much so that.
Yeah. So I'm curious, I want to hash this out because, let me see, I kind of like have half a thought here where I think as a therapist, right, I want to be like, well, you got the 7-year itch, right? But maybe it's because the relationship has to change and it has to evolve, I think for a lot of people that's kids, right? It's like, okay, the kind of like dating time is over. Now we're going to be parents. But then, you get the divorce during the kid time because like, oh shit, our relationship kind of atrophied, or the empty nest happens. And then they divorce right then and there because the relationship became about the kids and became about the family, and they lost that connection with each other. I think there's like another kind of therapy slant of like, oh, you have to like learn communication skills and learn how to like, get deeper and more intimate and more vulnerable. And like, there's always more there, but then the kind of like dude part of me is like, what if you just get bored? Like, what if there isn't that much there with people? And I wonder about that, right? Because I think people are deep, but they're not that deep. And sometimes I think boredom really can just like creep in, and then I can hear there can be like a search for novelty around that,
Yeah. No, I think that's so true. I think that goes for both genders. I work with mostly men whose partners or wives have said, we need to open up, more so than the opposite, if you can believe that. At first, when I first started seeing that and hearing that, and that's my own experience too. Lauren was like, I think we should open up our relationship. It was almost dumbfounding to me that's how that kind of has gone for multiple people. And again, the idea of boredom or, lacking something in a connection that people are wanting, fantasizing about, or needing, I think is a huge factor to their experience. Humans are inherently in need of connection, and more than one connection. And I'm just saying that not in the sense of non-monogamy, polyamory, or whatever. I just think we need connection. And so often in long-term relationship marriage, I see and feel that, because they've tried to create this bond that's so strong and so secure, a lot of the periphery and external kind of factors of other people or connections are just kind of missed out on, and not tended to as often. So yeah, if I sat with somebody or if I was with somebody for an extended period of time and we did the same kind of things and we had a lot of pattern behavior, yeah, fuck yeah, I get bored. Absolutely. and that in so many ways does trigger the sense of novelty seeking. But how do you do novelty in a monogamous relationship? And I think there's lots of ways to do it. I think it's just easier for some at this point, especially with non-monogamy polyamory being so cool and popular, to just go and grab that rather than is to work on the the needs or wants of the connection in general. I've had friends who have opened up their relationships and then kind of figured out that they want to come back together because they've seen and felt like what they can get from another place and how can they can incorporate it into their current relationship. So, I think it really goes both ways in that sense that, boredom, complacency, lack of excitement, like it's going to show up in any connection when you're with somebody for such an extended period of time. I mean, I can ask my parents, I've been together 40 years and, there's no way that they're like, oh yeah, we're totally solely, sufficient with each other all the time. Like there's just no way. They might pretend, sure, because that's my parents. But ultimately, like, I know there's been days where my mom has told me, oh God, I wish your dad would do more. And I'm like, cool, then make that happen. But ultimately it's that sense that, if we can figure out how to come back together in a way that's supportive to us and our connection, I think some of those other concepts of boredom, complacency, and what have you, maybe might not show up as much. The big thing for me is that I know that one person in my life cannot fulfill everything and all the needs that I have. So I wouldn't call that boredom. I would just call that reality to the situation that I have. I love all of my partners and I love all the things that we experience together. However, all of them fit a different niche in my life that I really, really, really appreciate, love, and need. And that's something that, I know I could have not have gotten if I didn't open up my relationship.
Yeah, and I would agree with that reality. I mean, that's kind of where I stand on it too, is one person can't fulfill everything. And I think that was a great lie that was told, I think, to our generation as millennials, and then even more so to the generation before us, right? With using Disney movies and fairy tales and all that kind of shit. Yeah, right. I think that was a massive lie. And I think it led to a lot of isolation, which I'm hearing you talk about. What I see when I look out there, right, where it's that huge focus on that nuclear family. And, forget about polyamory for a moment, just no community, right? I mean, no friends, no nothing, no real engagement. And I think with life being physically easier now than it's ever been, I mean, there's certainly emotional challenges, but being physically easier, there is so much more space for boredom, right? If you're trying to survive and scrape by, in the Middle Ages or whatever, you don't have time to be bored of your wife. You're just trying not to get killed by bandits and the plague and get your crops going, right? But now love and relationships and emotional needs are so much more important because we have the safety, physical safety to be able to really focus on them. So I do see, maybe the kind of fattiness of polyamory be kind of a lashback against that nuclear family thing, and I think the tact I take, and you're a part of that, is really focusing on community, right? And being I because that's my lashback against it, is I want to, hopefully raise my future children in community. I think community is super important. I live in a tiny mountain town. That community is a big part of that. But yeah, because I don't see a lot of people having that, even in our generation, right? I mean, I know so many people, I'm sure you do that, live in the city but don't know their neighbors or don't know anybody, right? There's in a little box, they're lonelier than ever, even though they're surrounded by people. I think that's just that's so common nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit on such a good point that because of our safety as a society, it's so acceptable in so many instances to just stay safe and not kind of challenge what we have once we find a partner. And I hear it all the time. I mean, there's a whole term now, cuffing season, right? Is that what they call that? Where it's you find somebody, you stick with them, and then that's it. And then there's nothing more. And I mean, that term to me just totally perpetuates the feeling of isolation is okay because we're safe. And that to me is just such a mind fuck, because I just, if that was my mentality, oh my God, dude, I'd be so bored. I'd be so isolated. I'd be so sad, really. I mean, obviously I'd be happy to be with this person, I'd say. And also I think it would hit a point where it was I need something else. And not just, another person, but just something, right? To kind of help me disengage from this kind of experience of this one thing, this one person, this one moment's gonna like be everything for you. Because I know myself well enough that that's just not how I can live. Like I thought for a moment that's how I could live, and then quickly realized, in my relationship that just wasn't it. And even in non-monogamy and polyamory, with how satiated I am, I still have moments of wanting more, wanting novelty, wanting to experience things that, that I want because I'm human and because I, want to experience things. And I have the option to do so based on the agreements that I have, which feels really, really good and supportive. I think there's this kind of, general thought or feeling that polyamory, non-monogamy, BDSM, kink are like kind of things that people do, kind of in a sense it's like fix something, right? Like we've talked about, or are like a year thing, and then you come back to what you normally know. And I think for me, that's just not the case, and at this point will never be the case. I get asked so often, hey, is this like your life now? And my answer is 100,000 bajillion% every time, yes. I would never want to go back to the way that I was or the kind of rhetoric that I believed in before. So, it's something that I think, people are conscious of and are willing to jump into. It's just how do we fight these kind of other normative experiences like we're describing of cuffing or, isolation is the way to go, or like finding that one person is kind of the end all cure all to like like you said, your loneliness, right? Or your satiation kind of factors in so many ways, because we are constantly in need of other human interaction other than with one individual.
It's so interesting. I'm smiling because the way you're talking, I think is differentiating our two paths, which is great. I think it's why we're like really good for each other, right? Because I agree. I think we have the same foundation, right? That like cuffing is bad, right? Like making one person be the answer for everything is it sets you up for failure, right? Whether it's like you're objectifying that person, you're ignoring your own needs, or you're just kind of like, kind of putting a Band-Aid over a problem. And I think like, what I would say, right, kind of like Buddhism slang, because when you're going through polyamory, I was going through Buddhism, right? So we both kind of got like indoctrinated in different, extreme traditions. And like Buddhism would be like, okay, if you're feeling empty without a person, like be alone, right? Be alone and sit in that emptiness and just like suffer until you get some insight, right? Like don't cuff, right? Don't grasp onto somebody, right? Whereas I think what polyamory says, which I think is equally valid and I'm interested in, because I think I need to learn from you, right? Like polyamory is like, no, go for it, but actually fully go for it, right? Don't like half-ass it by going for one person or one thing. Like be smart about it and kind of like play the field in a way, right? Or like diversify your experience, because that need and that want is valid and it's worth getting that fulfilled to like the best of your ability, because you only have one life to live. Is that fair to say? Kind of what that ideology, I guess, would say about that situation?
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. I mean, it's so interesting. I laugh about this a lot because when I first opened up our marriage, I was looking for very specific things. One just being intimacy and sex, because my relationship with Lauren had kind of teetered off on that expense. In trying to look for that, one, that's very hard. Sexual, intimate connection without kind of the emotional piece. And that was my first thought, was if I can just have sex with the next person I think I'm attracted to, everything's going to be great. And ultimately, that failed terribly. Like, just the people I was finding, what it did for me, during, after, and all things considered, and then realistically, like how much work it was was a big part of that. So it's like, I figured then there very shortly that I want like a girlfriend. I want a friends with benefits. I want a friend I get coffee with that maybe we make out sometimes, right? I want, a travel buddy. So for me, it was this experience of like, how do I find all of the things that non-monogamy can offer in a way that's really supportive to what I need? And like you're saying, I wasn't half-assing it. I was actually stating within my dating profiles, I want a friend to get coffee with, right? I want somebody, all these things that people could either say great or fuck you about in that instance. So, I still found a way into that space that was really supportive to what I was needing, and definitely moments of like internal suffering based on what was going on and all the things that were showing up, and kind of taking, like you're saying, that sense of Buddhism, like it's okay to be okay as well by myself. Harder for me as a person to do so. However, it was something that was very helpful in lots of moments where I was like, why am I grasping for this? What am I looking for? Because if I didn't have a broad understanding or like a very, strong awareness about why I was doing something, shit just always didn't go well. So, in the sense of like being very intentional about what I was eating or what I was looking for was very helpful. Was it really hard to obtain? Yes. Did I eventually get there? Somewhat, not fully. I don't suggest that that's like the way to go. I think more so if I were to do it again, it would be like, think about intentionally what you need and kind of stick with the one path, but try to find it in multiple places. Like what I have now, right? I have 3 enmeshed relationships that all serve me in many different ways and all feel very good, strong, and secure. And again, it's taken time to get there. However, that's what my poly dynamic makes most sense for me and the other people in my life. More so based on what I need and what I want, truthfully, right? Because that's what's worked. That's what has proven most beneficial for me.
If you're enjoying the podcast so far, please hit the subscribe button and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us to reach more men and inspire them to become the best versions of themselves. Thank you for your support. And now back to the show. You're in relationship, like long-term relationships with all these different women, and you're with them like, I don't know, I was gonna say fully, but I mean, fully, but not monogamously, I guess, right? Like you're there, good, bad, and ugly, right? Whereas when I see other people do it, and this is my judgment, of course, when I see other people do it, is that kind of objectification thing, kind of what you were talking about before. It's like, okay, I'm going to find a person to fit into a slot, and as long as we're in the slot, it's good. As long as we're just getting coffee and making out, it's good. But the moment that person's sad, or the moment that person has a trouble, I'm out. Because I didn't consent to that. I only consented to like getting coffee and making out. Whereas I think you really show up for your people, and it is like you have 3 partners, which I respect, because I think that is, when you talk about connection, that's connection, right? To me, it's not just sex and intimacy, which of course is important, but it's like being there for somebody and really getting to know somebody, no matter what's happening. Really being like intertwined with another human.
Totally. I mean, the best part about my experience, other than it's fucking great, is that I get to have connections with other people's connections in my polycule, right? Like I am finding a space of community that is larger than anything I could ever imagine. Like Lauren's partner, I'm close with, and he supports me in lots of ways. Jen's husband, same thing. Jessica's partners, I'm also close with as well. And it's something that it's like almost a collective pooled resource of knowledge, of actual resource, like physical resource, and just love, laughter, and enjoyment. I mean, it's such a beautiful thing to see how far the web of this polycule of our non-monogamy extends. I mean, it's people ask me too, like, do you ever want to have kids? I'm like, no, I don't. However, I have multiple people in my life and partners who do. And it's such a beautiful thing that I get to play a role in that. And it's so fulfilling to the point where I don't think I need to have that my own. Speaking of just non-monogamy and just polyamory in general, like this idea of loving multiple people, like I've had more time, energy, and space for my friends because of people supporting me and saying, you know what, we've seen each other this week a couple times, go spend some time with a friend that you also do love. I mean, I think of our relationship. I think of my relationship with you, with Caroline, with Sam even. And it's like, I love you all. And I am so honored to be a part of your life. and you bring so much to me that, again, I hope is so very reciprocal in what I can give to you. And it's such a beautiful experience to know that, like, we've talked about this, like, when you have children, dude, I'm gonna be there. Right? I'm gonna be there supporting them, and I hope that Jessica and all the other people can too, in regards of how that supports you and your experience and Caroline's experience and everybody else around. I mean, the breadth, man, and the depth of the connection I've experienced in the last 5-6 years has been unbelievable. Unbelievable. Nothing I could have ever found, honestly, back home in Chicago when I wasn't non-monogamous. So, it really has created so many opportunities in ways that have been, challenging and supportive.
Yeah, when I think you're doing it, right? And I think like I think challenging and supportive is so key because we talk about the loneliness epidemic a lot on this show, right? The Surgeon General, came out, I guess it was like maybe 4 or 5 years ago now with this whole speech about it, which is a powerful speech, important, to talk about, and really cites men in particular, right? And also specifically like white men in particular, right? People that are not part of an ethnic group that has more community built in, as people that are really struggling with loneliness. And it creates, not just the emotional pain, but it creates like, physical pain, disease, right? Obesity, isolation. And then in the worst case, things like school shooters, right? Or people that are serial killers, right? I mean, it's this really core problem, big problem in our country that, is only getting worse from what I can tell. But I think when you talk about the community, and something I'm very passionate about is it being good and bad. I think that's so important to just say to our listeners, because I think we were also sold this idea that like community is all good and it all feels warm and fuzzy and it's like all positive. But then when it gets bad, people just leave, right? Versus real community is like going through conflict and going through its ups and downs. And like sometimes you got to lean on somebody a little bit more. Sometimes they got to lean on you. And that's what it's about. And it's like, as I'm saying this out loud, I think it's wild that our generation is like having to reinvent this in a way. Something that seems so basic for human history. Just like the people around you, like being in a relationship with the people around you. Like we have to work so hard, I think, to really make that. And I think it's not given. I know so many of our peers that don't have that. And maybe some of our listeners that, they just watch a lot of TV, or they spend a lot of time just with their partner, or they get, absorbed into the kid realm. And, no shame on that, but I would urge you to like think about spreading out, because I think it's a very fragile design, because when things start to go wrong, it does really do take a village. I mean, that's kind of an old adage for a reason. So I think polyamory is one way that our culture is like trying to build community, with sexual bonds being, the main kind of glue in it. But I think there are other ways too. But yeah, I see polyamory kind of emerging, especially in like urban cultures, right? In like cities, because you don't have survival need in the same way in an urban city, because so much stuff is like handled for you, versus like a small town, like you need your neighbor to not get killed by snow,
Totally. I mean, it's interesting though that you say that, because I've heard of many non-monogamous communities, polyamorous communities that live on communes in rural places too. So that does happen. Again, very, very, sparse. However, it does show up in these ways where there's like these communities of people that do come together and absolutely, platonic connection, relationship connection, all the different kinds of alternative styles of connecting still do have that mentality and thought that it does take a community, kind of like a kibbutz in Israel, in that sense, which, dude, I would love that, and if we could do that here in this country, and make it like a non-monogamous kibbutz, that like people did engage in relationship with, and also have a common goal of like having something that, made the community money, right, to survive, and had some sort of governing experience. And I think that would be, a common kibbutz would be such an incredible thing to have here in America, and in a way that I think could be super supportive to not just non-monogamous people, but people in general, for sure. The other aspect that I wanted to touch base on when you're talking about community is outside of poly, right, and more so in like just ethical non-monogamy in general, with BDSM and the kink community, because those communities that I know that I've engaged with are so tight. There are the differences here of good and bad, or however in between, However, it's something that is such an incredible created space for people who are needing and wanting connection to move away from that loneliness. So many people that I know personally and people that I work with in the therapeutic realm have so much shame wrapped around their kinks, the things that they enjoy and that are, that turn them on, right? That get them excited. And they just don't know where to go. So, finding those spaces and engaging in those communities that are very welcoming and understanding and aware are so beautiful. I mean, I've gone to many events where someone shows up to, like a masochistic, you know, beating of a person. And people are like, oh my God, this is everything I've ever wanted. How did I not know about this before? And again, not just the aspect of, being excited sexually, but oh my God, there's people like me. I see them. They're just as kinky as I am or into BDSM in the way that like I strive to be. This is so incredible. And finding that in a way that is super supportive to just what their values are, really, what their goals are and what they're eating. I mean, you can meet so many people in those spaces that on the street you would never know. You would never know. And I think it's such a powerful experience for people who do isolate pretty tremendously.
Yeah, I think it's a really great, self-expression. Like you said, the ability to like be free and like let your freak flag fly, right? And just like, and not, and just to how you're saying, like, not just be accepted for what you're doing, but to be like applauded, for people to like love a part of you that you may have carried so much shame around for your entire life, to finally find people that like love that, want more of that, want as much of that as possible, want to do it with you. It's like you're getting this like mega corrective experience from something that usually carried a lot of shame. And yeah, I think I'm very similar to you, where it's like, as long as it's two consenting adults, like do whatever the fuck you want, right? Like you're a sovereign individual, So it is cool that I think our culture is starting to create some more space for those types of like contracts, I guess, for lack of a better term, but like just or agreements between people.
Of course, yeah, the consensual agreements. Yeah, it's so interesting to see, again, in the work that I do, more men feeling confident and comfortable and asking, where can I find this space for this thing? Which I think 5-6 years ago, honestly, I wouldn't have been navigating nearly as much. And it's just been really cool to see that, as much as there is this issue like you're describing of these very, kind of poignant demographics of people struggling, those are the people who are now, again, with time, been more open to communicating about what they need, what they want, and doing their best to dip their toe into those spaces and communities that really, have been life-changing and transformative. I have a client that I worked with recently who was really into consensual, non-consensual sex, and thought, does that make sense? just to make sure.
Yeah, like rape kink, right? Or like
yeah, it's a kink, right? And thinking like, oh, I'm so weird and uncomfortable, and then I just connected him with a colleague and a friend, and was like, this person knows everything about this. Talk to them. And like the next week, this client was like, oh my God, my life has changed. Like they just made this normal for me after all these years of feeling and thinking that it was the worst thing ever. And I've been talking to this guy for 5 years, and this just came up 3 months ago. So, to see that transformation and shift for me is in the therapeutic world and personally has just been unbelievable. I mean, it like makes me like tear up a little bit because it's so special.
Yeah, and for most people, it's so deeply buried under all those layers of shame. And, if you're listening, if you have, a kink or an interest and you're listening to Eliot, it's like, there are more people like you, right? It's like, and to be honest, you're probably already in touch with them. You're probably watching porn, right? You're probably like on chat board. Like you're probably like getting your fix somewhere. So it's like, okay, people are producing this content. People are consuming this content. Like you're clearly not alone. They're not making that video just for you, brother, right? Like there's like enough people out there that are into whatever you're into. And I would always advocate for like trying to figure out how to do it in person and do it consensually, because it does create those more connections and create a sense of community and kind of brings it out of the darkness more and into the limelight and into just being like, yeah, this is going to be a part of our society.
Yeah, I mean, it always again, it always has been, and it has been in very specific communities more openly. And now it's really incredible to see that it's not just the communities that we think engage in this behavior, or these kind of kinks or BDSM or non-monogamy. It's anybody and everybody can identify as non-monogamous or engage in polyamory or kink or BDSM. It's just how open they are about it. That I think is really the change that I've seen in lots of ways. And again, the curiosity as well, that people are experiencing that.
Yeah. So let me ask you this directly, like, how can people get started, right? If they feel like they are polyamorous or they're kinky or they want to explore, non-traditional part of themselves, like what should step one be?
I mean, research. I know that sounds cliche and like a cop-out kind of answer. It's something that I wish I would have done. I said, all right, we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this. And didn't think about how much that would actually affect me in my relationship. And then, of course, seeking the support, seeking help, finding the communities, number 2 and 3 being the most important experience. I mean, doing this on your own, in all intents and purposes, is probably the worst thing you can do, honestly, in regards of engaging in these communities or opening up a relationship, marriage, or what have you. I mean, it's just something that there's not enough education about. I mean, we grew up in a society, we go to school. Did they ever talk about kink, BDSM, non-monogamy, polyamory? I mean, never. So it's like we need to have a baseline of understanding of what it actually is before, realistically, before we can get into it. And I think that's one of the things that I fucked up with in my relationship. And I think so many people do. Just because it's such a you don't just open up your marriage or whatever. It's such a more complex experience that people, I think in some regard, just get excited about and just forget. There's a sense of like excitement, novelty, just joy of like what this could bring for somebody or someone in relationship or connection, and don't think about all the repercussions. And the things.
Well, so tell us a little bit about that. Like what are some pitfalls that people should look out for, or what are some repercussions that could happen that they might want to try to, preemptively deal with?
Yeah, I mean, again, opening up a marriage or a relationship or engaging in kink or BDSM, I mean, the biggest pitfall is just the communication around it and what the agreements are and what the expectations are and how to really, communicate in a way that's supportive to the connection. I think more so than anything, a pitfall is any of these types of alternative experiences are going to fix something. And if you have the mentality of this, non-monogamy, polyamory or kink BDSM going to fix something, honestly, completely inadequate in that sense. Like it just doesn't do that. It doesn't do that. It opens up a fuck ton of old wounds. I can tell you that much. And if you're not willing to work on them, humongous pitfall, humongous experience. I think a lot of people have that. Once they start doing all these things or engaging in communities, they don't recognize that it's bringing up shit for them that might be, a large trauma response or something from recent history or just anything that's triggering. The conversation I have with most people when they open up is like, what's your attachment style? And people are like, I don't even know what that means. So, that being something that is a huge part of navigating alternative lifestyles, like how do you show up in relationship now knowing that it's changing? And people, I swear to you, Mark, do not think about that when they're so stoked about going to fuck somebody else or whatever, or engage in something that they never thought they would. So I think, to pinpoint a pitfall, it's that, communication, man. It gets thrown out the window.
Yeah. And I think for most people, I mean, that's everyone I know, it's like, it's never just sex, which I think is part of your story too, right? Like you might start being like, okay, I want more sex or I want different kind of sex or whatever it is. But like, once you catch feelings, if you remember how like fucked up and crazy you were when you first met your primary partner, right? Like you're doing that again, but now you're doing that in a relationship, You know, like there's somebody else there that was built on stability and was built on, you know, this like kind of monogamous blueprint. But now you're adding this like kind of crazy energy into it, um, which I think it destabilizing. Yeah.
Yeah, it is absolutely destabilizing. And in my experience was just that. I opened up the marriage, didn't do the research, didn't do the, didn't have the support, and, really struggled. Really was in a lot of pain in the first, would say, year of engaging in polyamory and non-monogamy, man. It was brutal. And yeah, we didn't know. We didn't have the support or the communication or the knowledge to really do it in a way that would work. That took 3 years, if not more, 4 or 5. In regards of where I'm at now. I mean, it's constant. It's constant work. It's not just one thing shows up, you deal with it, and then it goes away. It's this thing's going to show up again and again and again, and you're going to have to navigate it differently this way than you did the last time. And there's no cure-all fix to anything when it comes to how complicated being in an alternative lifestyle is. And that's just truth, man. So many ways.
Right. Yeah. It's a lot of complexity, and like I said, everything is super fluid because now there's, the emotions of, 3 people, 4 people, 5 people, 6 people, right, online all at the same time. And everyone's got wounds, and everyone's got, trigger points and things like that can all get like flared up. Especially once you start adding sex in there and commitment and lifestyle, all that stuff. Yeah. So I guess my question is like, okay, so say they're going to do it, right? And I'm hearing you recommend work on the foundation of your first relationship first, right? Get a strong foundation before
Generally speaking, absolutely, yep.
Right. What kind of conversation should somebody be having with their partner before they even talk about opening up a marriage?
I mean, I think first and foremost, the most important thing is to just kind of do a check-in and kind of think about really deeply where your relationship is at and what it looks like and what you want it to be within the next month, 2 months, year, whatever. And be conscious about, hey, this is what I'm needing and this is what I'm wanting. And really being intentional about how you phrase that, for sure. And how you can then put into kind of action what that means and what that looks like for the couple or the people or the individual. And then pace, man. That's a word that I never even thought of in my own life before anything. I don't pace anything. I'm an instant gratification kind of person. So to be in a position to actually pace a relationship or pace a communication about something, was one thing that I wish I did and absolutely suggest most people do. For sure. Because if not, you're just going to start doing things out of character, out of kind of need, necessity, new relationship energy, right? So finding a really good medium to communicate about pacing, and then also communicating about what your agreements are, rather than what rules you have. Because rules are meant to be broken, man. I mean, we're human. That's just inherent. So having conversation about what an agreement is based on 2 consenting individuals, or 3 or 4 or whatever consenting individuals, is so key. It's so beneficial.
Yeah,
because those
can you open up those more? Like, if it's a rule and an agreement, like what would you?
Yeah, I mean, I think a rule is something that is not a boundary either. A rule is something that feels like is to the point. So a lot of the people I work with say, well, one of my rules is you can't sleep in the bed. A partner or a person can't sleep in the bed that's ours. Okay. And my question to you is why? Right. And so many people have that rule because they're scared. They're insecure. The bed is a sacred place for a lot of people monogamous right now. Right. So if that partner sleeps in that bed, and that's a rule and it's broken, how do you recover from that? Right? You fucked up. I don't appreciate that. This isn't going to happen again, right? There's more of a conversation that probably in general terms can go worse versus an agreement or a boundary around something like that. So boundary would say, hey, I think it'd be really supportive for our relationship if another partner didn't sleep in the bed. And if happenstance they did, let's talk about it. I will choose then what I do or where I sleep or how I engage with you then moving forward. An agreement, similarly so, hey, we've said that we're not going to have romantic partners sleep in our bed for now, right? Are you open? Can you agree to this changing down the line and being something that could be supported? Because again, you get to know somebody well enough, you hope that that's something that you can incorporate, right? Rather than, again, the strictness or the rigidity of a rule that's like a never changing experience that comes with a lot of emotion behind it.
Yeah. So just communicate to hell, right? Like just communicate every single step of the way and be open to things changing as, the relationships and feelings develop.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the only way that it can really develop if it's something that if you're committed to, right? The other big thing that I forgot to mention that I always forget is that both partners really have to consent to engaging in this lifestyle. And if they don't, how do you navigate that? How do you navigate that? Because I think it's something that we often forget is that, one person in a relationship or a partnership or couple or whatever can say, you know what, I really love the BDSM aspect of it, but I'm never going to catch feelings. The other person could be like, well, you know what, I'm not really into the BDSM side of things or kink side of things, but I really want a non-monogamous poly relationship with love. How do you navigate that? How do you agree to that? How do you have boundaries around that? Rules in that situation really don't work because you have two opposing experiences. It's impossible to be on the same page in that regard. So how do you agree to disagree in some regards around what those things look like? In so many instances. So really finding that balance, right? And that communication is so key in so many instances.
Yeah, and I think it just takes a level of EQ, again, another plug for therapy, right? Of like, to be able to really empathize with someone that you don't understand in some ways, right? I mean, especially if we're going on, I guess, I don't know how you can study this, but like we said before, of like, say polyamory is like a sexuality where some people are born polyamorous, some people are not, right? Like you could be in a relationship with someone that's polyamorous and you're not, or vice versa. So it could be something, yeah, all the time, right? Or it could be something like just how you're in a relationship with someone that's bisexual or gay or whatever, right? And you're not. It's like, so it does take a level of EQ to be able to empathize with somebody whose experience you may never really understand just because of the way you're wired, based on the random chance of birth.
Yeah, I mean, then that's a huge piece that you bring in too, Mark, is that, the amount of empathy I've gained from being in this relationship style, polyamory, non-monogamy has been unbelievable, man. Like I found myself as an empathetic person before, take it by 20 now because of how thoughtful, considerate, aware, understanding I've had to be about people's different dynamics. I can't, put my experience onto somebody and expect them to just, follow. It has to be an agreed upon experience, a consensual boundary conversation that really supports what everybody needs involved. It's such a key factor to success in relationship in this space. I mean, it's something that has been so necessary and has created so much growth around my own experience in it too. How to really be aware, conscious, depersonalize, and be empathetic to other people's experiences.
Yeah, for sure. Because it's like you're not just seeing different people's attachment styles and different people's, like sexuality. That's just the surface level they're talking about. You're also seeing other people's lifestyles, other people's like way of being, other people's conversation, other people's fears, other people's hopes, right? It's like you're having intimate relationships with all these different people and you're seeing behind the veil in a way that I think most people don't, right? I think most monogamous people is like, you see that with one person, right? You see kind of like the whole tape with one person. Everyone else, you see the highlight reels. But if you're polyamorous, right, like you're seeing everybody's ups, not everybody's, but way more than just one person, right? Multiple people's ups and downs and ugly moments and fights and all of that. You're not getting a censored version.
Totally. And it's not just what's happening between the two people. It's, again, their extended other group of connections that's affecting them as well as a huge part of that.
Yeah, you're getting their families, you're getting their other relationships, you're getting their children, right? You're getting the whole thing. It's a lot. I mean, I can see it as like a great, learning field. I think it's been great for you to like you said, to learn and like really like hone yourself in that. But I do think it does take quite a bit of guidance and intention. And I do get a little nervous when I see people that are just like flying into it without talking about it or really thinking about it. Well, we do have to start to wrap up. But Eliot, if people want to work with you and, I know you are a mentor for individuals that are exploring this alternative lifestyle, how can they access you?
Absolutely. Yeah. Please feel free to reach out. You can go to our website at connectedroots.net. I'm on there. My bio's there. You can read all about it. Also, listening to this podcast is another place to do that too. But ultimately, check out our website. Give me a call, 720-593-1062. Here to have a consultation with you, learn more about your experience, and really hope to work with people who, identify as non-monogamous, polyamorous, kinky, engage in BDSM, all the above. It's a passion of mine and something that I think I can very much support a lot of individuals about.
Yeah. Listener, to truly is an expert on this. All that stuff will be in the show notes. Please reach out to him and his organization, especially if you're considering this or, kind of guys I work with that are, older, right? That have dependents, they have kids, they have jobs. They don't want to fuck it up, right? If you don't want to fuck it up, call Eliot because he will help you not fuck it up. Because I think it is possible.
That's what I'm going for.
Yeah, I think it's possible to really, really fuck this shit up. So call him and get some mentorship around this. So Eliot, thank you again for being on the show. It was wonderful.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure. I really appreciate it.
And listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. If you like this show, do all the social stuff, like, subscribe, comment, give us 5-star reviews. We're trying to build those as much as possible on Apple iTunes as well as Spotify, and certainly pass this along to someone that is considering polyamory or kink or alternative lifestyle or somebody who is curious about opening up their marriage. I think this is a great primer, and directing them to Eliot, his organization, is a great first step. So thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next week, another episode of the Men's Therapy Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and leave a review. And don't forget to visit menstherapy.online to learn more about the work that we are doing to support and inspire men. Until next time, keep moving forward.